So, today we discuss media, laws, and women. In other words, we are concerned about how women are portrayed in media, to what extent media could be accused as a culprit in denigrating the position of women, what could be expected from the media, any laws against the representation of women in media are there. We'll be discussing media and women in a nutshell. Uh, because media reflects the position of women, and for the mass, it is the media that plays a pivotal role. People form public opinion about the status of women through the portrayal of the positions of women in the media, in the society. The media plays a very active role. Uh, it is said that the position of women, uh, it, in fact, women are still struggling to entrench their position, safeguard their position. We talk of equality, but it is not to be seen around. Same work, same payment, all these features simply fizzle out. But this has not been the situation. If you go down to the history, we find that women were given more importance, more respect, more participation in the functioning of the society. And in this light, we start our discussion looking at the background to a bit, what position they occupied and how things developed, and what are the legal provisions to safeguard the position of women in our society. So, to begin with, just the background first. Uh, the history is replete with instances in which women play a very important, very crucial role. In fact, the two very leading ladies, Maitreyi and Gargi, were the ones who even contributed to the Vedas. So you can figure out that that was the position of women. Yatra nari pujyante tat ramante devata. That was the situation. The women were worshipped because it was believed that God stays only there where women are worshipped. So, going back to the Manu Smriti, you find that there is a mandate for a highest respect for women, and regard must be extended for the full protection throughout their lifetime. Now, that was their status. They were shown the respect, dignity, and their position was very strong during those times. And however, the things have changed of late, and there are a number of factors are responsible for that. We are not going into that direction, but situations have changed. Now the women also have started coming out of their shell to fight for their rights, and that is a good development. Because after that, there was the position of women was not as good as it was supposed to be. As of now, you will find women have been depicted in the most respectable and aesthetic manner on one hand. You see, there is a section of society that attach much importance to them. They treat them at par. However, in some of the segments, still you find that uh, they are denigrated, they are shown in poor light, they become the culprit of the indecency, vulgarity, obscenity, deceptions even. So that the picture that is depicted is somewhat darker as compared to the other half. So there is a great imbalance. It is not that everywhere you find that women are looked down upon. No, there are certain segments who attach equal importance, if not more. Equality is the catchword. That is how this gender issue is to be uh, uh, confronted. There should not be any biasness on the basis of gender or any denigration on the basis of gender. That is the issue. Now, in that light, what is the role of the media? That is going to be discussed. Media and media laws and women, how women are portrayed in the media and what their positions are and what are the safeguards. So this is to begin with. They occupied a very dignified position, and later there was a slipshod. They simply, because of the social context, social conditions that developed, uh, some sort of denigration did occur. And we are concerned about this obscenity part, the obscene portrayal of women. And by obscenity, we mean any indecent portrayal or representation of women, which is to be seen in a very poor light, very vulgar, or but the question is, this word obscenity or vulgarity or aesthetics is a very relative term. It differs from culture to culture. The advertisements which are even appreciated in the West may be looked down upon in India because of the cultural values. So it is a very relative term. What appears to be vulgar might not be considered as vulgar in some other context, in some other countries. So culture plays a decisive role. So keeping in mind the cultural values that we cherish, vulgarity will have to be defined. You cannot out and out say that this portrayal was vulgar. So the fine line of demarcation could only be drawn if we could have a fair amount of idea regarding the cultural context. So culture will have to be kept in mind while defining what is vulgar, what is not. In fact, they used to, maybe 5 years back, on AXN channel, AXN, they used to uh, analyze the world's 100 uh, successful advertisements. Now, this program was banned in India after some time because it was figured out that some of the advertisement that was considered was not very appropriate in Indian context. So that were banned. So therefore, culture is going to play the decisive role. Cultural context will have to be referred to while uh, trying to figure out what is vulgar, what is not. So the test of obscenity is whether the tendency of the matter charged with obscenity is to deprave uh, those whose minds are open to such immoral influence. Now, this act of vulgarity will influence the mind of people or people who are in the mass media to carry out those stories. Now, there lies the problem, because these gullible mind, these susceptible mind are very easily prone to be influenced by these vulgarity that is depicted in mass media. Although there are a number of provisions in IPC, Indian Penal Code, but we are not very satisfied with that because there is a different law altogether that we will be discussing. But do remember that there are certain provisions in the form of section 292, 293 and 294 Indian Penal Code, and they refer to the laws to curb obscenity. Just a piece of information. Section 292, 293 and 294 refers to laws dealing with the obscenity. Now, what is the state of affairs? As of now, what is the condition and what is expected? Uh, a state of affairs. What is the situation as of now? You see, the ongoing explosion of obscenity. You see, what is the biggest problem over here? There is a cultural diffusion. The culture of East and West are intermingling, and you cannot be very orthodox anymore. You have to open up. So conservatism and modernity coexist right now. That is the biggest. That is a period of transition, and all sorts of problem. In fact, every point of time in history is a moment of transition. So there is a flux of changes that occur. So these traditional forces will insist that you should not change, and the Western or modern forces will ask you to change. That will allure for changes, and there lies the conflict. So we cannot take a side, and to what extent we should uh, any act is permissible. That is very relative because of the diffusion of culture. So the ongoing explosion of obscenity in Indian cinema and the increasing public tolerance. You see, even public have become tolerant of unwanted, unwarranted, and excessive depiction of sex and obscenity is the in the Indian films has raised concern over the effects of such depiction on the society. So you see, there is a concern by people as to how the culture will mold up. You see, culture cannot remain the very same all these years. Culture also undergoes change. Though or albeit the change, the rate of change is slow, still because of the uh, interaction with the Western world, because we can easily get exposed to their culture. World is a small village now. Number of media are there to interact with the uh, different part of the world at the same time. So now we are exposed to different cultural values. We are more prone to change. But the changes that take place within our own culture is something that is creating the trouble. This orthodox set of mind is creating the troubles. So the Puritan will definitely oppose. They will not appreciate the changes that take place. They figure out that everything that is happening around is denigrating our culture. So there lies the problem, the coexistence, the orthodox culture and the modernity is coexisting at the same time. So therefore, people have become more permissive to obscenity. What was considered to be obscene is slowly and steadily losing its impact. Those were the concept, you see, which was outrightly rejected earlier. Now they are being subscribed to in the name of modernity. So changes because of the diffusion of culture is taking place. So that is a very intricate issue, because the media will be charged with a regressive approach if they do not open up. And on the other hand, to what extent that they could open up, that is also a greater challenge. So therefore, the situation is very uh, tricky, very dubious. So the state of affairs. And yes, please note down all these things, the important ones. It is observed that in recent times, Media is representing women in an indecent way. You can compare even the films. It is said that films are the reflections of the society. You can figure out the hell of a difference between the films of yesteryears and the films of today. But as it has been pointed out, you cannot expect the culture to remain intact. The culture which does not change simply withers away. The culture will also undergo a change with respect to time. Then only it could survive. So changes uh, do occur as far as the culture is concerned. However, the core cultural values are expected to remain intact. And there lies the biggest problem, how to deal with the two sides of the coin, modernity and traditionalist approach. So it is seen to flout all norms relating to the obscenity, decency, morality. There is a systematic overdose of nudity and vulgarity. In fact, earlier there was a dress code for the models when the late Sushma Swaraj was the information and broadcasting minister. During her regime, a number of advertisements were banned on the pretext that they were not decent as far as the Indian culture was considered. These advertisements were banned. And even this step of hers was criticized because it is very difficult to draw the line. And to what extent can you expect that the laws could take a control of all this? It is always better that uh, people exercise self-restraint, because if laws start uh, calling the shots, the creativity would be uh, annihilated. The creativity would be lost simply. So therefore, objections were raised that how can the advertisement, and one of the advertisement that was banned was that in which Mahima Chaudhary was there, and the ad was that uh, while dancing, the her skirt was raised to up to the level of the knee, and that was something that was not well accepted. So the question is, how can you draw the demarcating line? So therefore, problems are there when you have to develop a code of conduct for media relating to women portrayal. So, in fact, in the media industry, women are treated as goods to promote sales. You see, there is charges of commoditification. Women are portrayed as commodity to uh, sensitize people. So this is something that there is a commoditification of women. It is alleged, opinions may vary. Women and their concerns or problems are no longer visible. Achha, that is a typical one. The various issues, the various problems that are faced by women today is not getting the space or time which is due. Because the idea is that they cover their story as a breaking news just for the sake of TRP, to sensationalize people, and just to make people curious, and then the story is then sidelined. So all the crucial issues that should otherwise be covered is not being portrayed in the proper manner. In fact, the commercialization of media is now calling the shots. So women and their concerns or problems are no longer visible in mass media. There has been increasing commoditization of women. in mass media. Mind the word commoditization. Women are portrayed as commodity to serve the purpose to sail home a point, which is something which is not very appreciable. And the portrayal of gender as a product in the media is well documented. So you think of any medium, newspaper, television, films, magazine, hoardings, posters, cable, etc., whatever. The story is the same. Getting it? So although there is a advertising standard council of India, but it is a toothless tiger. It does not have much power or authority to make to restrict somebody, because here the idea is altogether different. First, the advertisement comes, and if it is not well received, then ASCI, Advertising Standard Council of India, makes a request to discontinue with the advertisement. Very much unlike censor board. You see, in as far as the films are concerned, they need to get the certification of the censor board. Then only it could be released for the theater. But here the story is very different. So there is no screening committee as such. You can, when the damage is done, then they go for ex post facto approach. Then they try to undo the damage, which is very strange. So typical move. Every medium is hand in gloves as far as the denigration of the position of women is concerned. So the charges are leveled against each of them in equal capacity. So therefore, there is a need for regulation. If they decide not to bring about changes in their ways of dealing with the issues related to women, ultimately, the only way out that is that we need to have regulations. We need to have laws which could exercise checks and balance as to what should be done, what should not be done. Acha, do you remember? Acha, don't you think that there will be a curb on creativity if the law intervenes? The different provisions of the law. What should be the distance between the opposite sexes? So, if women should not be shown smoking around or taking liquor, that will kill creativity to a large extent. So, instead of exercising self-restraint, if media if media decisions are to be made as per the influence of the rule of the land, now that is going to create all sorts of troubles. But ultimately, if you are not very keen to fall in line, if you cross the line all the times, ultimately there has to be provisions of laws. The laws should be enacted to regulate the various practices, including the portrayal of women in media. So, because there is a growing indecent representation of women, growth is immense, phenomenal. Each media is trying to outdo the other. So, if there is a growing indecent representation of women or references to women publications, particularly in advertisements, which have the effect of denigrating women and are derogatory to women, one of the options is to resort to the law. And in India, we have got an act in this context. We will discuss this act in the coming class. Please do remember the name of the act. It is called the Indecent Representation of Women Prohibition Act 1986. Do remember IRWA, Indecent Representation of Women, in bracket you write Prohibition Act 1986. the Indecent Representation of Women Prohibition Act 1986. In fact, this act has been mentioned in your syllabus as well. So we will be discussing the uh, major provisions as to what are the provisions or what are the safeguards that one could resort to if media fails to portray the women in proper light. And this act was legislated effectively to prohibit indecent representation of women through any publication, media, or advertisement. So you see, we are more concerned about the mass media, which portrays women in a certain light. If the portrayal of women in the mass media is objectionable, there will be a certain law which would uh, curb such practices. So please do remember this act, IRWA 86, was only considered in order to desist such practices in the mass media in which the portrayal of women were in poor light. And the object of this act is to prevent depiction of the figure, form of body of women in any indecent form, which is likely to deprave means morally incorrect, morally corrupt, deprave or corrupt, and injure the public morality or morals. Injure the public morality or morals. So the idea is that if it is not to be seen in good light by people at large, and there is a depiction of the women body in poor light, definitely there has to have certain restrictions imposed, because your message does not reaches to one person. This publication, this mass media will carry the representation of the women either in a form of pictures or elaborate description to a large group of people, a sea of humanity, and the damage will be very grave. So therefore, the law will have to be considered in that light. So at that note, we will continue the rest of the discussion when we discuss the provisions of IPRA in the coming class. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.